Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to continue on with this little mini series of reviews that I've been doing for you that I've entitled Crazy Beers for 10 Years. And the idea behind this is to celebrate 10 years of Rampant Lion Reviews here on YouTube. Now, the brewery that we're going to have a look at today is one that has featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but I think it is fair to say that this brewery are very well rounded these days, and they are potentially the most recognisable Scottish craft beer brand, in addition to being one of the most recognisable craft beer brands globally. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is another from them that I've kept for a number of years to review on a special occasion. It's a style that I haven't come across all that often, and a sub-style that I don't think I've ever had from this brewery, if memory serves me correctly, and certainly a sub-style that you don't come across all that often either. But needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Aberdeenshire in the northeast of Scotland. We're going to go to a little place called Ellon to be specific, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Brewdog, who have appeared on the channel countless times. I think the second most reviewed brewery here on the channel these days. But yeah, this particular beer is called Black Jacques. It comes in at 11.1% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial Black Saison. So when it comes to black and Imperial Black Saisons, I think we've only reviewed 2 or 3 of these on the channel in the entirety of the channel's existence. So this is something that I do need to explore a little bit more actually. But the full description of this one here on the side of the bottle is that it's an Imperial Black Saison aged in red wine barrels. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I bought this beer at the very end of 2013 or the start of 2014, but the best before date on this one is the 29th of the 4th, 2024. So it could well be that I bought this one a little bit after I got back from Germany in 2014 and then just decided to keep it. But yeah, this is another part of the Crazy Beers for 10 Years mini-series that I've been doing for you, and yeah, it should make for a really interesting one. There's not all that often you come across an Imperial Black Saison, as I said, so give me some recommendations of this particular beer sub-style in the comment section below. But let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. An 11.1% Imperial Black Saison aged in red wine barrels. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewdog before, and we will add a few more to that list in the near future because we've got another couple of beers to look at from them that I've been keeping for a wee while. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist along with a number of other things, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit once again about Brewdog. So Brewdog is basically the love child of James Watt and Marketing Dickey, and they founded the company together back in 2007 in a very small unit in the Keswick Industrial Estate in Fraserburgh, in the very northeast of Scotland. But both of these guys studied together at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. James studied law and economics, while Martin studied in the brewing and distilling programme, and he was known to homebrew when he was at university, but after he completed his degree he went on to work for Thornbridge Brewery down in England, and he stayed with them for about 2 years from what I understand. But once he and his friend got together, they decided they wanted to start up their own company, and they went for it. But they're known for being a very experimental brewery, and for a long time they were known for their strong beers as well. The Tactical Nuclear Penguin, the Sink the Bismarck and the End of History, and they had that little competition with Schwarzbräu from Germany. But these guys are very much influenced by the American craft brewing Renaissance, and in particular Stone Brewing Company from California. But after a few years, in 2012, they moved to their new facility, their purpose-built facility, we should say, in Ellon, which is closer to the city of Aberdeen, where I used to study chemistry. And it is there that they focused their main brewing operations for a number of years. But over the years as well, they've kind of expanded a hell of a lot, much of that being thanks to their Equity for Punks scheme that they did, where people could buy shares in the brewery, and they used that to invest in new brewing equipment and things like this. They also have several bars across the world. These began with the original bar outside of Marshall College in 2010. They expanded throughout Scotland over the following year and then further afield. But these days they have around 120 bars worldwide, which is extremely impressive. But in recent times they've been continuing to open more bars, but they've also expanded the hotel side of their business as well, and they have a few different breweries these days. They opened their second brewery in Columbus in Ohio over in the US, and these days they've also got one in Brisbane in Australia and also one in Berlin in Germany, which was the former Stone Brewing facility down there. But I think they're planning to open up a brewery in Asia as well. I think it was Japan they were looking at for that, so we'll just need to see how that progresses too. They started distilling spirits under the name Lone Wolf Distillery, and they have their Overworks facility next to the original brewery in Ellon, which is producing sour beers, and they released the first beers from there in early 2019. But today these guys are producing in the region of 800,000 hectolitres of beer per year worldwide. And yeah, there has been a little bit of controversy surrounding this company as well, mainly due to the behaviour of James Watt. But yeah, that's not something I want to get into too much. And you know, when it comes to my personal opinions about Brewdog over the years, I think their darker beers have stayed pretty solid. A lot of their lighter beers have been a little bit kind of in recent times. But of course, one of the main men behind the brewing that Brewdog did on their kind of rise to stardom was Stuart Bowman. He left the company to join Diageo, if I'm not mistaken, and they also had Franz as well, who was German, and he was a very, very talented brewer too. But once these two guys left the brewery, they went down, you know, they hit a little bit of a trough, to be honest with you. But in recent times, their beers have improved a little bit, and there has been a fair degree of consistency with what they've been putting out there. But you do have to give Brewdog credit in the sense that they've encouraged a lot of people to look at craft beer and drinking craft beer rather than sticking to the kind of big macro lagers. They've been quite successful in that particular perspective, from that particular perspective. But yeah, the actions of James Watt and some of the business decisions that these guys have made, like lying to the council and so on, has been very, very controversial. And that's one of the reasons why I don't review all that many Brewdog beers. But yeah, as of August 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 550 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. When it comes to my personal favourite beers that I've had from Brewdog over the years, back in the day, the Hardcore IPA was always a solid favourite. The Dogma Scotch Ale was great. And also the Riptide Stout, the Sweet Stout, was always very nice too. But yeah, those are the ones that I would recommend that you try. The 5 AM Saint, the Red Ale, was always very good too. But yeah, these beers have been kind of tinkered with, and they're not quite the same as they were back in the day, I have to say. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brewdog for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So like I said to you earlier, this one is called Black Jacques. It comes in at 11.1% ABV, and it's an Imperial Black Saison. The artwork on this one is a little bit different compared to what we've seen from Brewdog in the past, but there you can see the original Brewdog symbol, which I have to admit I think is a little bit better than the new kind of more corporate friendly ones that they have these days. And there you can see we have one of the original Brewdog bottle caps there, the black with the gold dog, which was usually reserved for the kind of heavier and darker beers. But it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. We've got one of these little crazy Brewdog blurbs that I always used to enjoy. But yeah, it says here this one is an Imperial Black Saison aged in red wine barrels. Pick a card, play the game. This one simple Belgian farmhand has been twisted beyond recognition by time, fate, and lengthy imprisonment in French oak. Today he flits like rumour from barren highlands to moonlit vineyard, hunting down clues to a long-forgotten past, a burnt barrel, a tattered tricolour, a shattered wine glass. The secrets of his nefarious past are there, yet they elude his restless eye. A one-of-a-kind card-counting freak with a mind as brilliantly fragile as a Faberge egg, unloved, unwelcome, and all the richer for it, who said simple life was the best. Yeah, quite nice that. But yeah, it tells you a little bit about Brewdog and Beer for Punks on the side there too, but not really interested in that, to be honest. But yeah, nice artwork as I showed you. There's your bottle cap once again. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Definitely cool to try Black Jacques after having been very curious about this beer since buying it back in the day. But yeah, let's do that then. So, this guy out and see what we have here. So yeah, I do love an Imperial Saison, but Imperial Black Saisons, you don't come across these beers all that often at all. Little tiny bit of sediment left on the bottom of the bottle there while we pour this one out, but yeah, it looks pretty nice. So without playing too much with this beer and trying to get a head out of it, you can see that it's poured with just a very kind of thin, foamy, wispy layer, and there's a nice kind of ring of a quite bubbly head just around the edge of the glass there. I think that's fair to describe this as being quite sort of fawn coloured. Yeah, I'd say a kind of fawn colour there, but yeah, just some really wispy layers sitting on top of the beer there. But in terms of the colour of this one, if we shine the light through this, it's a lovely, very dark, ebony rosewood colour. I don't think there's any other way to describe this one. There's not too much in the way of visible carbonation with the beer, just a few little bubbles going up toward the surface of it there, but it looks pretty damn nice. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer can affect the colour as well. But when it comes to a beer that has a little bit of black malt in it, it's very, very difficult to actually affect the colour of the beer with simply barrel aging the thing. It works a little bit more effectively with the kind of more brown sugary beers like barley wines and doppelbocks and stuff like this. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from an Imperial Black Saison, this is pretty much bang on the money. Lovely dark ebony rosewood colour, and you've got a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to this one when you put the light through it. But yeah, I don't think we need to say any more about the actual appearance of this beer. There's nothing particularly surprising about it when you consider what style it is, even though we've had very few encounters with this style on the channel. So I think the thing to do now is just have a little look at the aroma. So let's do that and see what this beer is going to give us. Oh, yeah. I have to say, it's a really, really interesting aroma. There's a little mix of everything. I mean, you can certainly get the wine barrels pushing their way out of this one the more that you smell of it. You get more and more of that, for sure. You've got a bit of toasty malt in there, you've got a nice kind of bit of breadiness, you've got the little bit of funky character from the Saison side of things, you've got a wee bit of fruitiness, and you've still, crazily enough, after about 10 years of keeping this beer, you do have a little bit of a kind of hoppy green component to this one too. I think this is going to be a really quite interesting taste, and I love it when I come across beer styles that you very rarely get the chance to review. So I think this is going to be one that will test my palate quite a little bit. But after 3,800 reviews, that's what you want, to be quite frank. So yeah, let's just break the aroma down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth before we actually taste the beer. So yeah, the backbone of the beer, you absolutely get that kind of oaky character in there. So yeah, lovely kind of smooth oaky character in this one. It has got a little bit of dryness to it, which for me is definitely an indicator of European oak rather than American oak. American oak is always that little bit smoother and it gives you a wee bit of vanilla. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised actually with this one. I'm trying to think what's the really sharp red wine. It's gone right out of my head. But yeah, the oaky character you get out of this is quite dry and quite European. There's a little bit of vanilla in there too. But yeah, definitely European oak forming the backbone of this beer. On top of that, you are of course getting the kind of the red winey Saison notes, and it's quite a bright red wine, quite juicy, but at the same time it's actually quite sharp and quite zippy in its characteristics too. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite interesting, and that's only the barrel we've talked about. We've not actually talked about the beer itself yet. So yeah, for me, the backbone of this beer, it definitely has a little bit of that kind of roasty, toasty, kind of slightly well-fired, bread crusty character coming out of it. I don't know if I'd go as far. I don't know if I would go as far as describing that as being like black bread crust. But yeah, definitely a little bit of that roasty, toasty, black bread crust coming out of this one. But yeah, the more that I smell of it, it's more like a kind of well-fired morning roll. I don't know if I would go as far as saying like, you know, charred or something like that. But yeah, definitely a bit of a kind of well-fired bread crusty base in this one. Above that, you've got like a little touch of a sweet rye bready note. There's definitely some kind of cracker in there as well, like a really light kind of just like wafer, crackery type note too. Some sweeter brown bread in there, a little bit of white bread as well. And yeah, above all of that, you get a mix of the wholemeal brown bread, white bread, and then you start to get some of the brown sugars out of this beer. So you've got a lovely roasty, toasty, kind of brown sugary character in this one. Teeny little bit of leathery brown sugar as well, but certainly you get a lot of woodiness, you get a little bit of an almost kind of peppery spice out of this beer the more that you smell of it too. And yeah, it's just a really dry, but yeah, it's just a really quite dry beer, this one, kind of funky, kind of dry. Yeah, I think that covers everything we really need to say about the kind of malty and yeasty side of this beer from the aroma perspective. Now, on the hoppy side of things, this beer is about 9 years old at the time that we're opening this one up. So, Saisons, yeah, it depends. They can have a good little bit of hoppy presence. It just kind of depends on how the brewer feels, I guess, when they're creating the recipe. But yeah, you still, even though this beer is like 9 years old, you still do get a little bit of a kind of hoppy character out of this. Absolutely getting a little bit of earthiness. There's a little bit of herbal character in there, but I'm getting quite a wee bit of floral aromaticity, and it almost has a wee touch of like a slightly minty freshness to it, which I find really interesting. Good little bit of kind of grassy zestiness in there as well, which is good. But then you've also got the fruity side of the beer, which is something we haven't really looked at yet in the aroma. So let's just round off our aroma section with a little look at the fruity character. But I mean, for me, underneath that, you've got a little bit of sharpness from the kind of red wine, vinous-y characteristics, so that's definitely there. You have got a little bit of a kind of figgy note to it, some kind of nice raisiny sharpness. So yeah, juicy fig, bit of raisiny sharpness, but I'm getting quite a lot of blackberry out of this one, like a quite sharp blackberry character. Yeah, the fruity notes in this one I would say are very, very sharp, so I'm hoping there's not oxidation in this one, because you know, when you have these really sharp red fruity characters, that can be a sign of a little bit of oxidation. But yeah, the Brewdog beers that we've had that have been aged this long have lasted quite well, but those were Imperial Stouts, not Imperial Black Saisons. But yeah, and we do have to remember as well, it is red wine barrel aged, so that's going to give you a wee bit of a tartness. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the aroma of this beer. So let's just get stuck into it and see what it's all about. I'm very curious about this. So yeah, this one is the Black Jacques, an 11.1% Imperial Black Saison aged in red wine barrels from Brewdog in Ellon in Aberdeenshire in the northeast of Scotland. Let's get stuck in. Another one of my crazy beers for 10 years. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah. This is interesting. It comes in and the impact is actually quite... The impact that it gives you is quite light and a little bit sharp, and you almost get the impression that it's not going to give you too much in the way of flavour, but then you can feel the sort of drier and more roasty elements just kind of pushing their way out. The sort of Saison side of things and the kind of roasty toasty side of things as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really quite interesting, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, this is definitely one of the quirkier things that I've ever had from Brewdog at all, never mind this kind of crazy beers for 10 years series. But yeah, I will say that that is quite a nice beer. So thumbs up to Brewdog for this. And I will say that yeah, apart from the way the flavours come out, the actual flavour profile of this beer is kind of what you would expect to a degree from the from what you get in the aroma. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this. Let's just break the beer down then and describe the flavour a little bit more in depth for you, as we always do. We'll start with that middle third of the palate then. So the backbone of the beer, you have that lovely kind of smooth and slightly dry oaky character coming out of it. So yeah, nice little bit of dry oaky character in there, and it does get drier and drier the further into the aftertaste that you go. But above the kind of dry woody layer in this case, you have got that nice kind of sharp red winey vinous kind of note there, and that lingers into the aftertaste too. It's almost like a kind of black currant wine or something like that. That's the kind of vibe that I'm getting from the wine notes. This one, it's quite juicy, but it's also got a little bit of a kind of sharper, zippy note to it. And by no means am I an expert on wines. I'm far better with craft beer, of course, and Scotch whisky. But wines, you know, that's something that I really do need to get. That I do really need to get a little bit more of a grip on at some point in the future, as I say. But you know, you can't do everything. But yeah, that describes the kind of the base of that middle third of your palate. Above that, you start to get some of the roasty, toasty, well-fired, bread crusty characters that you would expect of an Imperial Black Saison. So yeah, that roasty, toasty, well-fired, bread crusty note is in there. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's black malt. It has a bit of toastiness to it and a bit of well-fired character, but it's not black, if that makes sense. Now, above that roasty kind of bread crust, you start to get the kind of light and more airy bready notes in there, and this is typical, of course, of a Saison. A Saison is quite a yeast-focused style. So yeah, for me, you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. Then above that, you've got the kind of wholemeal, I wouldn't say rye bread, there's maybe a tiny little layer of rye bread above that well-fired bread crust, and then you've got like a really fluffy kind of brown bready type note in there. And within the kind of brown bready layer, there's just that little touch of nuttiness, and above that you start to get a little bit of a toasty brown sugary character out of this one. It's a very light brown sugary character, admittedly, but it is definitely there. Then in the dead centre of your palate you've got this little circle which is a kind of dry leathery brown sugar. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's like Werther's Original. It's kind of not quite bright enough to be that, and it's not sweet enough to be that either, but it certainly does have a little bit of that more kind of leathery character to it. The only other thing to say about the kind of malty side of this beer in that sense would be that it has a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuity character sitting on top of it. But I think when we say this, that is the point where we've covered everything in the flavour in that middle third of your palate then. So we should move on to the back third of the palate, but as I've always said, on the back third of the palate you get similar flavours, they just come out in different intensities, but do remember that general trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours come out further forward and more dry and bitter flavours come out a little bit further back. So yeah, let's look at that middle third of your palate then. Or the back third of your palate, I should say. So, border region between middle and back third of your palate, that's where I was going. This is why I shouldn't film reviews when I'm tired, to be honest, but still. Yeah, the border region here, between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of rye bready character in there. You've got a kind of wholemealy brown bready character in there, and then a little touch of white bread above that, so that forms the border region there. But yet again, in the back third of your palate you can feel the really dry, you can feel that really dry woody character in there from the wine barrel. You can even feel the sort of grapey, winey layer in this one. It's still quite sharp, in fairness, it's still quite sharp and zippy, but you can feel it's that little bit drier. And above that you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. I would say on the back third of your palate it is more like black malt. And above that you get a layer of rye bread, which is a little bit kind of lighter and more airy. Then you get the wholemeal kind of brown bready character sitting above that, which again is quite tall and light and airy. And then you can feel some of the more leathery brown sugary notes just creeping over the top of that and forming the top of the malty side of things on that back third of your palate. But then above that, on the back third of your palate, you do have the yeasty character, and that's quite important when it comes to the Saison. The Saison is quite a yeast forward beer. So let's just look at those yeasty flavours then. Yeah, so for me, the yeasty character in this beer is quite interesting. So you can feel a little bit of a dense, kind of wholemeal, brown bready, sweet character there. So you can feel that dense wholemeal, brown bready, sweet character, which is nice. It's kind of wrapped in honeycomb, but it also has it also gives me the impression of like a brandy soaked, like fruit roll or fruit loaf or something like that. So yeah, you can feel that in there, and this is of course all sitting on top of the. This is of course all sitting on top of that back third of your palate there. So yeah, dense kind of sweet, like brandy soaked fruit loaf brown bread. It's kind of wrapped in this. It feels as if it's wrapped in this slightly toasty, caramelly, Christmas puddingy, brown sugary note there. But yeah, I think that covers what we need to do about the yeasty side of the beer. The only other thing I would add to that actually is that it gets a little bit more woody and crackery the further into the aftertaste that you go. But definitely you can feel the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. But I think we've said everything we need to about the malty and yeasty side of this beer. So let's round off then with a wee look at the hoppy side of things and then the fruity part of the beer. So back corners of your palate then. Let's look at that. So, yeah, the back corners of the palate in this beer, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness in there. I'd be quite curious to know what hops they've used in this. tried to look it up, but yeah, it wouldn't open the page for some reason, I don't know why. But yeah, in the back corners of the palate, you've got a lovely little bit of earthiness in there. And as you move further forward, that earthiness does kind of linger there, but it gets a little bit lighter and less intense. So yeah, as you reach the kind of halfway point on the sides of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a more herbal character coming out. And as you push toward the very front corners of your tongue there, it's a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic. It's almost got a wee bit of like minty type freshness to it. But round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a little bit of a lighter, more grassy character coming out of the beer. But that is the thing that really surprises me about this one, is the fact that the beer is kind of 10 years old and it's still giving you some of these hoppy characteristics. And you would expect a little bit of hoppiness from a Saison for sure. But yeah, interesting stuff. A little bit of a more zesty, zippy grassiness on the front curve of your tongue and a little bit of floral behind it. But yeah, earthy and nice and kind of herbal as well on the sides of your palate there. But let's have a little look at that front third of your palate then, just to kind of round off the actual tasting part of the video then. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Let's start there. So for me, the border region between that front and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a sort of bready build up in this one. Wee touch of rye bread in the base, wholemeal brown bread above that. It's almost got a little bit of a crackery element to it as well, I would say. But then the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the nice kind of woody character in there, but it feels a little bit smoother. You get a little touch of the wine spirit in there too. Then yeah, toasty bread crust, but a smooth brown bread above that. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that fruity side of things then. And we should also talk about impact flavour with this beer, because it is, you know, with the red wine barrel, it does have a little bit of that kind of funky sour element to it as well. So, yeah, the fruity side of the beer for me, this one does have a little bit of a kind of sharper impact to it, which I find quite interesting. You do get a little bit of that sharper kind of red winey, vinous character in the beginning, but then it mellows out and gives you a few other kind of fruity notes too. So yeah, you can feel that kind of sharper note just behind the very front tip of your tongue there. And I've always said that for me, a kind of sour beer, it's all about how the it is actually all about how you get the impact and then how that mellows out. So that's kind of interesting with this. So yeah, you do get a little bit of a sharper kind of like almost raisiny, sour grapey character behind that front tip of your tongue, and then it just mellows out. But the actual fruity part of the beer, and let's start at the back of that front third of your palate and just work our way forward. So as I say, very sharp in the beginning. You get quite a little bit of raisiny character out of this one. At the back you've got a little bit of a juicy plum. Then underneath that you get a bit of a drier kind of pruny note there. But yeah, the back half of that front third of your palate is quite sharp. Raisin, plum, and then a drier prune. As you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, it's got a wee bit more of a kind of raisiny, a bit more of a figgy type character coming out of it. Then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it really is quite a little bit of a blackberry type flavour you get with this one. So the fruity side of this beer is actually quite sharp, and you can feel the kind of, the more you go into the aftertaste for this beer, you start to get more and more kind of funky characters coming out of it. But yeah, I think it goes together really quite nicely, to be honest, and it gets a big thumbs up from me from that perspective. So yeah, the sharpness that this beer has in the beginning just mellows out really nicely, and that is a kind of red wine barrel type sharpness to it. So yeah, I think the way that this goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour side of things. Let's just round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, sorry about the cut there, guys, little problem with the camera, but as I said, we were just going to check out the mouthfeel. So yeah, for me, this beer then, I would say that it's kind of middle of the road, so mid-bodied, potentially toward the lower end of the mid-bodied, but having that little sour character, that little vinous note from the red wine barrels is probably making it feel a little bit lighter for me. I always find that wine barrel aged beers feel quite light in their mouthfeel, but yeah, you've got a little bit of roasty toastiness in there, a little bit of dryness with this beer. It does have a slight degree of slickness to it as well, but yeah, I think calling this one mid-bodied to light end of mid-bodied is probably fair. Yeah, a little bit slick, a little bit drier and roasty into the aftertaste, but it works really nicely. But yeah, as I said, the barrel side of things in this beer, when we talk about the barrel, the malt and the yeast, you've got a lovely nice kind of little bit of dry barrel-y character in there, roasty character on top of it, a bit of smoothness there and a dry sweetness on top, but the kind of funky woody character and the dryness that comes into the aftertaste is what really lingers with this one, and I do really like how that comes out in this beer. You do get a wee bit of that kind of sharpness and sour character from the Imperial flavour too, and that is from the red wine barrel. So the Imperial Black Saison side of things is really quite interesting. I would have loved to try the virgin beer for this one. I don't know if they ever released the kind of virgin Imperial Black Saison. I'd be very curious to try that compared to the barrel aged version. But yeah, the wine barrels in this one actually turn this beer into a proper kind of sour beer, and I'd be quite curious to know how much of the potency of the impact flavour in this one has been affected by how long I've kind of left this beer in the bottle. So yeah, a few interesting points of food for thought with this particular beer. But yeah, the impact flavour in this one, you get a little bit of that sharper vinous-y character in there. It mellows out really nicely, but as we said, the malty and barrel side of this beer, you've got the smoothness of the wood underneath, the sharpness of the kind of wine, the roasty toasty well-fired bread crust, a smoother bready character, and then a dry sweetness on top of it. You've got a very layered malt base in this beer. But in terms of the IBU count, this is an interesting point with this one. So yeah, for me, the IBU count in this beer, it must be 50-ish IBUs with this one, because you get a lot of roasty toasty black malt, you get quite a bit of kind of grainy bitterness out of the beer too, but it's kind of counteracted a little bit by the sour winey side of things too, so maybe the actual IBU count of this beer would be a little bit less, but yeah, 50 or 60 IBUs in this beer would not surprise me. And yeah, the way that goes together is quite interesting. We've already described the malt base, the sour side of things, like I say, a little bit sharper in the beginning, but it mellows out quite nicely, and you do get a fair little bit of that kind of juiciness, a kind of red fruity juiciness into the aftertaste with this beer, but you have got that kind of vinous impact with this one, which is really interesting. But yeah, the Imperial Black Saison as a style is not one you're going to come across all that often. The red wine barrel in this one is quite obvious, and it is quite potent in its in affecting the flavour in this beer. So just be aware of that if you actually do get the chance to try this one. I'm not sure if they've redone this beer. I think they did a couple of years after I bought this one, but I'm not sure how recently that did take place. But yeah, a really interesting beer, this one, and certainly one that has tested my palate. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this. So do let me know some other Imperial Black Saisons in the comments section below if you have any in mind. I'd love to review them and just see what I think. But yeah, this was the Black Jacques, an 11.1% red wine barrel aged Imperial Black Saison from Brewdog in Ellon in Aberdeenshire here in Scotland. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brewdog as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future, because I've got another 2 beers, I think it is, that I want to have a little look at from these guys in the Crazy Beers for 10 Years mini-series. So yeah, you'll see those. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Brewdog's social media, and I will see you guys again in another review very, very shortly. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.